Welcome to Creep, the channel where shadows come to life and stories of the unknown send shivers down your spine. Tonight, we delve into one of the most chilling legends to emerge from Ireland, a story so haunting, so deeply unsettling, that it has been whispered about for decades. The tale of the phantom nurse of the O'Byrne Maternity Hospital. Located just outside Dublin, this hospital once symbolized hope and new beginnings. But beneath its pristine exterior lay a sinister legacy, a dark chapter of unexplained deaths, eerie sightings, and a mystery that even time has failed to bury. Who was the phantom nurse? Was she a tragic victim, a vengeful spirit, or something far more sinister? And what horrifying secrets were unearthed in the ruins of the O'Byrne Maternity Hospital after its closure? Prepare yourselves for a journey into the heart of fear, a story blending fact and legend, tragedy and terror. This is the spine-chilling mystery of the phantom nurse of the O'Byrne Maternity Hospital. Turn down the lights, settle in, and let's begin. The story begins in the quiet outskirts of Dublin, where the O'Byrne Maternity Hospital once stood. Open in the early 1900s, the hospital was a place where life began, but for many, it was also where life tragically ended. From its inception, whispers surrounded the hospital. Rumors of unusual practices, unexplained deaths, and a lingering sense of unease that seemed to seep through its very walls. By the 1930s, strange reports began to surface. Nurses and patients alike described seeing a figure, a woman dressed in the traditional uniform of the time. At first glance, she appeared to be just another nurse, but those who saw her up close would describe something far more unsettling: a surgical mask that barely hid the scars etched into her face, and an icy aura that seemed to follow her wherever she went. It was said that her presence always brought misfortune. Healthy babies would suddenly fall ill and die, and mothers who caught a glimpse of the phantom nurse often spoke of a bone-chilling cold and an overwhelming sense of dread. One night in 1946, the legend took a darker turn when a young nurse, Margaret Deegan, claimed the phantom nurse was real and responsible for the death of a newborn under her care. Margaret's accusations were dismissed, and she was blamed for the tragedy. But what happened next turned the rumor into something far more sinister and undeniably real. Margaret Deegan was dismissed from her position at the O'Byrne Maternity Hospital, labeled as careless and incompetent, but she refused to accept the blame. Margaret was adamant. Someone else had been in the room with her that night, a nurse with a disfigured face, dressed in a uniform that seemed older than the hospital itself. Her colleagues scoffed, dismissing her claims as the ramblings of a guilty conscience. Margaret, however, became obsessed. She began to visit archives and speak with older nurses who had worked in the hospital for decades. What she uncovered only deepened her fear. There were scattered reports of a mysterious nurse dating back as far as the 1930s. Descriptions eerily similar to the figure Margaret claimed to have seen. In every case, the sightings coincided with inexplicable deaths or medical errors that defied explanation. Just days after her dismissal, Margaret was found dead in her small apartment. The official cause was ruled as suicide, a combination of pills and alcohol, but the scene left more questions than answers. Her body was discovered sitting upright in her bed, her face frozen in a mask of pure terror. On the wall above her head, written in what appeared to be dried blood, were the chilling words, "She comes for us." Margaret's death sent ripples of fear through the hospital staff. Whispered conversations filled the halls, and even the most skeptical among them began to avoid certain parts of the building, especially at night. Yet, the hospital continued its operations, as if trying to bury the growing unease beneath a facade of normalcy. But the fear could not be buried forever. In the years that followed, O'Byrne Maternity became synonymous with tragedy and terror. And in 1961, after years of declining birth rates and mounting movement, the hospital closed its doors for good. But the story doesn't end there, not even close. What happened during its demolition in the 1980s would unearth a horror that no one was prepared to face. In 1983, the O'Byrne Maternity Hospital, after decades of tragedy and unease, was finally set to be demolished. The building, which had once served as a symbol of medical care, had now become a relic of fear. But as the construction crew began tearing down the structure, something far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined was uncovered. Behind a false wall, hidden from view, they discovered a room that had remained sealed for years, perhaps even decades. The walls were lined with outdated medical equipment, dusty and covered in cobwebs, but what stood out most was a makeshift operating table at the center of the room. It was old, rusted, and stained with dark marks that no one dared to touch. The workers, curious yet wary, began to look around, and that's when they found them. Bones. Human bones. Dozens of them, some incomplete, others half buried under medical instruments. Among the remains were those of infants, their tiny bones twisted and shattered in ways that could not be explained by natural causes. And there were adult bones as well, women, who appeared to have been subjected to medical procedures of a horrifying nature. The most chilling discovery, however, was the records. Pieces of paper, yellowed with age, written in a hurried hand. They spoke of secret procedures, failed pregnancies, and most chilling of all, experiments on the living. The hospital, it seemed, had been involved in unspeakable practices, abortions, mutilations, and something far darker. Some have speculated that the nurse with the disfigured face, the one seen by Margaret Deegan and countless others, was part of these twisted practices. Perhaps she had been one of the nurses involved in these horrific procedures, a willing participant, or perhaps she had been one of the victims herself. No one will ever know for sure, but what is certain is that the spirit of the O'Byrne maternity, haunted by its own dark past, did not fade with the building's demolition. Asterisk, even today, the legacy of the ghostly nurse lingers. The area where the hospital once stood has long since been redeveloped, but locals swear they've seen her. Late at night, when the wind howls through the streets, a figure dressed in old-fashioned nursing garb, with a surgical mask obscuring most of her face, is said to wander the empty roads. And when people approach, she disappears as mysteriously as she appeared, leaving only a sense of cold, a feeling of dread, and the haunting sound of something that should never have been. But of course, the question remains. Was she truly a nurse from the hospital's dark past, or was she something far worse? Something not of this world? Is she still out there, forever bound to the tragedies of O'Byrne? Or perhaps, just perhaps, we've only begun to uncover the true horrors that lay buried beneath the walls of that forgotten place. And that, my friends, is the terrifying tale of the ghost nurse of the O'Byrne Maternity Hospital, a haunting that continues to send chills down the spine of anyone who dares to learn its story. What do you think? Was the nurse a victim of dark medical practices? Or was she something far darker, something beyond our understanding? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Remember, sometimes the scariest stories aren't the ones that come from the supernatural, but the ones that come from real life. What we uncover in the shadows may be far worse than any ghost or monster. So, always be cautious about where you step, because you never know what might still be lurking in the dark corners of our world. If you enjoyed this chilling tale, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another terrifying story. Until next time, sleep tight if you can. This is Creep, where the stories we tell are more than just legends. They're a warning